Late at night, a black single mother named Angela walked down the long street with her young son holding her hand. His small fingers wrapped tightly around hers as if he could feel the quiet danger in the air. Because the street was too silent, the kind of silence that made even normal sounds feel loud inside the chest. And the streetlights flickered above them, casting long shadows that stretched and moved like they were alive. And Angela noticed everything, even though she did not turn her head. She noticed the broken bottle near the sidewalk, the old car parked with its lights off, the sound of low voices somewhere behind her, voices that stopped whenever her steps slowed. And across the road, a group of men leaned against a wall pretending to laugh about nothing. But their eyes were fixed on her, judging her, measuring her. And one of them whispered something that made the others grin. Another nodded and said in a low voice that she was alone and looked tired and would be an easy target. And Angela heard those words, even though they were meant to stay hidden, because she had learned long ago how danger sounded, how it moved, how it breathed. And her heart began to beat faster, but her face did not change. Her steps stayed steady, and she kept walking as if she had not noticed anything at all, while her son looked up at her and asked softly if they were almost home. And she smiled gently and told him yes, very soon, even though home still felt far away. And every step forward felt heavier than the last, not because she was weak, but because she was thinking, watching, planning, and the men began to move slowly, spreading out, one crossing the street, another stepping away from the wall, their laughter fading into something colder, something sharper. And Angela felt that moment when the night shifted, when fear tried to take control. But she pushed it down because panic never helped. And she remembered all the nights she had walked alone after late shifts, all the looks people gave her, all the times they assumed she was helpless just because she was tired and quiet. And she tightened her grip on her son's hand, not in fear but in promise. A silent promise that nothing would happen to him. Not tonight, not ever if she could stop it. And the street seemed to narrow as the men closed the distance, their footsteps now clear. Slow and confident like hunters who believed the hunt was already over. And one of them cleared his throat loudly to get her attention. But she did not turn. She did not speed up. She did not slow down. She stayed calm. And that calm confused them because they expected fear. They expected shaking hands and quick steps. But instead, they saw a woman walking straight ahead with her shoulders squared. And Angela's mind raced through details. The open store 2 blocks back. The dark alley to the left she would avoid. The sound of a car far away that meant the street was not fully empty. And she counted her breaths the way she always did when pressure tried to rise. 1, 2, 3, slow and steady, while the men whispered again, and one said she must not have noticed them. Another said she was pretending to be brave. And another laughed and said brave people break faster. And Angela felt anger then, not loud anger, but a deep quiet one. The kind that came from being underestimated too many times. From being seen as weak when she had survived things they could not imagine. And she remembered the nights she cried silently so her son would not hear. The morning she woke before sunrise to work again. The lessons life forced her to learn without asking, and she felt that anger turn into focus. Sharp and clear, and the men were closer now. Close enough that she could smell the smoke on their clothes. Close enough that her son squeezed her hand tighter, and she whispered to him to keep walking and stay close. Her voice low and calm like this was just another walk home. And that calm was the most dangerous thing in that moment, because it hid everything she was ready to do. And one of the men stepped in front of her path, blocking the light from the street lamp, his shadow falling over her and her son. And he smiled in a way that did not reach his eyes. And for a second the world seemed to hold its breath, the air thick and heavy. And the audience could feel that anything could happen next, that one wrong move could change everything. But Angela stopped walking and looked up slowly, meeting his eyes without fear, without anger, just steady and clear. And that look made him hesitate, even if he did not understand why. Because it was the look of someone who had already faced worse and survived. And behind him the other men slowed, sensing something was not going as planned. And Angela's heart still beat fast, but her mind was calm. Calm like the surface of deep water hiding strong currents below. And she said nothing yet, because silence can be louder than words. And the night waited, the streetlights flickered again, and the first wave of danger hovered between them. Unfinished, uncertain, ready to break in any direction, leaving the audience holding their breath. Knowing this was only the beginning, Angela did not always walk with this kind of calm, because there was a time when fear followed her everywhere. Back when life first broke her open and forced her to grow stronger than she ever planned to be. And the story of her strength did not start on this dark street, but many years earlier when she became a mother far sooner than she expected. When love and loss arrived together and changed her world in one painful moment. And after her husband passed away, she stood alone with a small child and a future that felt heavy and unclear. And people around her spoke softly to her like she was fragile, like she might fall apart at any moment, and some offered help while others offered pity. But both made her feel small, and Angela hated feeling small. So she learned to stand taller, even when her knees shook, and she took any job she could find. Cleaning offices at night, stocking shelves before sunrise, smiling at customers during the day, and sleep became something she borrowed in short pieces. And her body grew tired, but her mind grew sharp, because she had no choice but to notice things, to read people quickly, to sense danger before it showed its face. And there were moments when she was scared, moments when the world felt unfair and cruel. But she never let those moments last too long, because her son needed her steady, needed her strong, needed her present. And slowly life taught her lessons that no book ever could. Lessons about how people behave when they think no one is watching, about how confidence can be real or fake, about how silence can protect you better than shouting. And Angela watched everything, learned from everything, storing it away quietly. And there was a chapter of her life she never spoke about, a job she once took that was meant to be temporary, but changed her forever. A place where she learned how people think when they feel powerful and how they act when that power is threatened. And she learned control there, not control over others, but control over herself. Control over her breathing, her fear, her reactions. And when that chapter ended, she walked away without telling anyone, choosing a quiet life instead, raising her son, blending into the background where no one looked too closely. And over the years, people mistook her quiet for weakness, her tired eyes for defeat, her simple clothes for helplessness. And sometimes she let them believe it, because being underestimated felt safer than being noticed. And on that night on the street, every one of those memories moved through her mind like fast shadows, not distracting her but grounding her, reminding her who she was beneath the surface. And as the men stood nearby, thinking they had control, Angela thought about all the times she had faced pressure before, all the moments she survived by staying calm when everything inside wanted to run. And she realized this was just another test, another moment where her past was quietly guiding her steps. And she glanced down at her son and saw trust in his eyes, complete and unbroken. And that trust filled her with a steady warmth that pushed fear aside, because she knew that no matter what happened, she would not freeze. She would not beg. She would not fall apart the way people expected her to. And the night around her felt heavy but familiar, like storms she had already walked through. And as the men whispered again, thinking she had nowhere to go, Angela stood there with a calm that came from years of struggle, years of learning, years of surviving. And the audience could feel that this was not just a tired mother on a dark street. This was someone shaped by hard lessons, someone who had learned how to stand firm when the world leaned in too close. And though the danger had not yet fully shown itself, the foundation of what came next was already set, because Angela was not who they thought she was, and that mistake would soon begin to matter. The moment stretched longer than it should have, the kind of moment where time feels thick and slow, and the air presses down on everyone at once. And the men began to move with more confidence now that Angela had stopped. Because to them, stopping meant fear, and fear meant control. And one of them stepped closer while another drifted to the side, cutting off the path without saying it out loud. And Angela saw it clearly. The way they spread out just enough to surround without looking obvious. The way their eyes kept checking each other to feel brave. And she noticed small things they did not notice about themselves. Like the man on the left tapping his foot too fast. Like the one behind her shifting his weight again and again. Like the leader keeping his voice low but his shoulders tight. And these details told her more than their words ever could. Because people who are truly confident do not rush, and people who feel powerful do not need to prove it. And Angela felt her son press closer to her side, his small body stiff. And she placed her hand gently on his shoulder, steady and warm. A silent message telling him to stay calm and stay quiet. And she looked up at the man in front of her again. Not quickly and not slowly, just enough to let him know she saw him clearly. Not as a threat and not as a savior, but simply as a person trying to play a role. And that look unsettled him more than shouting ever could. And he spoke then, his voice casual but sharp around the edges, asking where she thought she was going so late, and Angela did not answer right away, because silence forces people to fill the space. And she let that space grow, just a little, long enough for him to feel it, long enough for the others to shift behind him. And then she answered calmly, saying she was going home. Nothing more and nothing less, and her voice did not shake. And that calm made one of the men laugh nervously, because calm did not fit the story they had already written about her. And the leader smiled again, closer now, too close, and said the night was dangerous for someone like her. And Angela heard the meaning behind his words, heard the warning wrapped in fake concern. And she nodded once, slowly, like she agreed with him. And that confused him even more, because agreement was not part of the plan either. And while he tried to understand her reaction, Angela's eyes moved just slightly, taking in the street behind him, the broken streetlight that still worked enough to cast a weak glow. The open space between two buildings that could not hide more than one person at a time. The faint sound of a radio from a nearby apartment window, proof that they were not as alone as they believed. And she adjusted her stance without anyone noticing, shifting her weight, placing herself just a bit in front of her son, not in a dramatic way, but in a natural one, the way a mother does without thinking. And the men noticed something else then, something small but important. She was not begging. She was not rushing her words. She was not apologizing for being there. And those missing signs made them uneasy. And one of them whispered that they should move this along, that people might come by. And the leader's jaw tightened because he did not like being rushed, especially not in front of others, and he leaned in closer and lowered his voice, telling her again that the street was not safe and that she should hand over what she had, because things could get ugly fast. And Angela felt the threat clearly now, sharp and real. And her heart beat faster again, but her mind stayed steady. And she thought about timing, because timing mattered more than strength. And she thought about how people behave when they believe they are winning, how they relax too early, how they stop paying attention. And she decided this was not the moment to resist and not the moment to submit either. This was the moment to shift the balance without them noticing. And she did something simple, something so normal that it did not raise alarm. She reached into her pocket slowly, not suddenly, And the men tensed at first, but relaxed when they saw the movement was careful. And one of them smirked, thinking the story was going the way it should. And Angela felt that smirk settle into place, because overconfidence was heavy and slow. And she pulled out her phone but did not hold it up like a shield. She did not wave it or hide it. She just held it loosely in her hand, screen dark. And she looked at the leader again and said quietly that she did not want trouble, that she just wanted to go home with her child. And the words were simple, but the tone was firm. And the leader glanced at the phone and then back at her face. And something flickered there, doubt maybe, or curiosity, because the phone was not shaking either. And the man behind her asked why she had taken it out. And Angela answered honestly that she always kept it ready. And she let that sentence hang without explaining why. And silence rushed in again. And in that silence, the men began to imagine things. Because imagination is powerful when fear slips in. And the leader asked, "Ready for what?" And Angela tilted her head slightly, just enough to seem thoughtful, and said, "Ready for anything." And that was when the shift began, slow and quiet, but real. Because confidence that does not shout feels different, heavier. And the man who had laughed earlier stopped smiling, and the one tapping his foot stopped tapping. And they all became more aware of the space around them, of the street, of the windows, of the sounds they had ignored before. And Angela could feel it happening, the moment when control starts to loosen. Not enough to break, but enough to crack, and she pressed gently on her son's shoulder again. A reminder to stay still, and she met the leader's eyes and held them. Not challenging and not afraid, just steady. And that steadiness made him uncomfortable because it gave him nothing to push against. And he straightened slightly and told her she was brave to talk like that. Brave or stupid, and Angela answered that she was just tired. Tired of being judged, tired of being followed, tired of being treated like she did not belong. And her words were calm but carried weight because they were true. And truth spoken without fear can be unsettling. And one of the men muttered that this was taking too long. And another glanced down the street again, and the leader hesitated. Just for a second, and that second mattered. Because hesitation opens doors, and Angela saw it and felt a quiet certainty settle in her chest. Not relief and not victory, but readiness. And she knew the trap was no longer just theirs. It was shared now, shaped by their assumptions and her patience. And she took one small step forward, not past them and not into them, just forward enough to claim space. And the leader stepped back without meaning to. And when he realized it, he frowned, embarrassed. And the power in the group shifted again, subtle but clear. And Angela did not smile and did not speak. She simply waited, and waiting made them restless. And restlessness leads to mistakes, and somewhere in the distance a car passed, its headlights briefly lighting the street. And in that brief light, the men saw Angela clearly, not weak and not lost, just present and unafraid. And that image did not match the story they had chosen. And the audience could feel the tension tightening, like a rope pulled too far, knowing that something had to give soon. Knowing that the trap they believed they set was no longer secure, and that whatever happened next would not follow the plan they came with, because the woman standing in front of them was already changing the rules without raising her voice or lifting her hand. And the night seemed to hold its breath again, waiting for the next move, waiting for the moment when the Viveng balance would tip completely. The shift happened so quietly that none of the men noticed it at first, because they were still caught in their own confidence, still believing the moment belonged to them. And Angela used that belief like a door left unlocked, stepping through it without force and without noise. And she took a slow breath and looked down at her phone again, not in panic and not in hurry, just calmly, like someone checking the time, and that simple action drew their eyes to the screen, even though it was still dark. And she spoke then, her voice low but clear, saying that she really did not want trouble tonight. And the leader nodded as if he understood, as if he had heard those words many times before. And he told her to hand over the phone and anything else she had, so everyone could walk away easy. And Angela listened without interrupting, because letting people talk often makes them reveal more than they plan to. And while he spoke, she turned the phone slightly so the light from the street lamp reflected off the screen just enough to show it was active now. And that small glow caught the eye of the man standing to the side, the nervous one, and his body stiffened for a moment before he tried to hide it. And Angela noticed, because she noticed everything. And she said calmly that she had already shared her location. And those words were soft and simple, but they landed heavy, because silence followed them like a shadow. And the leader frowned and asked what she meant, his voice sharper now, less playful, and Angela did not answer right away. She just looked at him steadily, letting the idea settle in his mind, letting doubt grow on its own, and one of the men behind him whispered asking if she was bluffing. And another took a step back without realizing it, and Angela finally spoke again, saying she always shared her location when walking late, especially with her child, because it made her feel safer. And she said it like it was normal, like it was something any careful mother would do, and that normal tone made it harder to dismiss because it sounded true. And the leader laughed shortly and said that did not matter, that no one would come in time, and Angela nodded again, agreeing just enough to make him comfortable. And then she added quietly that it was not just one person, and that was the first real crack, because his smile faded a little, and the men looked at each other, and the street felt suddenly less empty, even though nothing had changed. And Angela could see the questions forming in their eyes, questions they did not want to ask out loud. And she kept her body relaxed, her shoulders low, her breathing slow, because fear feeds on movement and she was giving it none. And she thought about her son, about keeping him calm. And she squeezed his hand gently, grounding herself and him at the same time. And she felt him steady beside her, trusting her without words. And that trust strengthened her more than anything else. And the leader stepped closer again, trying to regain control, and told her she was talking too much, and Angela met his eyes and said that maybe he should listen instead. And that sentence surprised even her a little, not because it was bold, but because it was true. And one of the men laughed nervously again, a sound that broke too quickly, and another looked down the street, checking for movement, and Angela watched them shift, watched the confidence drain slowly from their posture, because uncertainty is uncomfortable and they were not used to it. And she decided it was time for the first real shock. Not loud and not dramatic, but enough to change the direction completely. And she raised the phone slightly now, enough for them to see the screen clearly, not close enough to grab. And the light from it reflected on her face, calm and focused. And she said that the call was already connected. And the leader's eyes narrowed, and he demanded to see it. And Angela shook her head slowly, saying that was not necessary, because the person on the other end could hear everything. And that was when the man behind the leader cursed under his breath, because the idea of being heard made everything feel different. And Angela continued speaking, explaining that she had learned long ago to never walk into a situation without a way out. And her voice did not rise and did not shake. And the leader tried to laugh again, but it sounded forced now. And he told her she was lying, that she was just trying to scare them. And Angela did not argue. She did not defend herself. She simply stayed silent again. And that silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. And one of the men took another step back, his eyes scanning the windows, the corners, the street behind them, and Angela saw his fear grow. Because fear spreads faster than confidence, and she added one more detail calmly, saying that if anything happened to her or her son, The location and audio would not stop, and that was when the leader froze. Not fully and not openly, but enough for Angela to see it. Because plans do not include witnesses, and the idea that someone else might already be involved changed the risk in his mind. And the street felt colder then, not because of the weather, but because control was slipping from his hands. And Angela did not push further, because pressure can break things too fast. And she wanted them thinking, doubting, hesitating. And one of the men asked in a low voice if they should leave. And that question was the real shock, because it showed fear where there was supposed to be strength, and the leader snapped at him to be quiet. But his voice cracked slightly, and Angela heard it. And she felt the balance tilt, slow but sure. And she lowered the phone again, showing she was not trying to threaten him, just stating facts. And she said she did not want trouble, and that she believed they did not either. And she told them they could all walk away and forget this moment. And her words were not a plea, they were an offer. And offers feel different when power shifts. And the leader hesitated again, longer this time. And Angela could see the fight in his mind, the choice between pride and safety, between control and risk, and pride is loud but fear is honest. And the men behind him were no longer hiding their discomfort. Shifting, looking away, listening for sounds that might not even be there. And Angela stood still through it all, her calm like a mirror showing them their own doubt. And somewhere nearby a door opened and closed. A normal sound that suddenly felt loud, and one of the men flinched. And Angela knew then that the first wave had passed. Not because the danger was gone, but because the illusion was broken. And once an illusion breaks, it cannot be fully rebuilt. And she looked down at her son and smiled softly. Not because everything was over, but because the worst assumption they made was already falling apart. And the night seemed to breathe again, the tension shifting from sharp and sudden to slow and uncertain. And the audience could feel that this moment mattered, that the story had crossed a line where nothing would go the way the men expected. Because the woman they thought was an easy target had just turned their confidence against them without raising her voice or lifting a hand. And the first shock had landed, quiet but powerful, setting the stage for everything that would come next. The street felt different now. Not safer but unsettled, like the ground had shifted just enough to make everyone unsure of their footing. And Angela could feel it in the way the men no longer stood tall, in the way their eyes moved too much, checking shadows that had not mattered before. And she knew this was the moment where truth, even a small piece of it, could change everything. Because fear grows fastest when people realize they do not fully understand the situation they are in. And she decided it was time to let them see her more clearly, not all of her, and not her whole past, but enough to make their assumptions collapse under their own weight. And she spoke again, her voice steady and calm, telling them that people often thought she was weak because she was quiet, because she was tired, because she walked alone with a child. And she said she used to think that too, a long time ago, and the leader frowned, confused by her tone, because it was not defensive and not angry. It was reflective, like someone explaining something already decided. And Angela continued, saying that life had taught her lessons she never asked for, lessons about danger and survival, and she learned them the hard way. And the men listened despite themselves, because stories pull attention, even when people do not want to listen. And she told them there was a time when she worked nights in places most people never saw, places where fear was normal and mistakes were costly. And she did not give details, because details were not needed. And the lack of detail made it heavier, made their imaginations fill in the gaps. And one of the men swallowed hard, his confidence slipping further. And Angela said she learned how people move when they want power, how they speak when they think they have control, and how fast that control disappears when things do not go as planned. And as she spoke, the leader's jaw tightened, because he recognized himself in her words, even if he did not want to admit it. And Angela explained that she learned how to stay calm when voices got loud, how to listen when threats were made, how to see exits when others only saw walls. And her voice never changed, never rose, never shook. And that calm made the truth feel real, because lies often rush and truth can afford to move slowly. And one of the men muttered that she was trying to scare them again. But his voice lacked strength, and Angela looked at him briefly, not sharply and not kindly, just honestly, and said she was not trying to scare anyone. She was just them being misunderstood. And that sentence hung in the air, heavy and clear. And she added that she did not want to teach her son fear. She wanted to teach him awareness, and the men glanced at the child then, really looked at him for the first time, standing close to his mother, quiet but alert. And something shifted again, because children change the shape of a moment. And Angela said she knew exactly how this situation could end badly for everyone, not just for her. And she spoke about consequences without naming them, letting the weight of the word do the work. And the leader stepped back slightly, rubbing his jaw, because the story he had told himself at the start no longer fit. And people hate when reality refuses to match their expectations. And Angela continued, explaining that strength did not always look like fists or loud voices. Sometimes it looked like patience, like planning, like knowing when to speak and when to stay quiet. And as she spoke, she felt years of silence lift just a little, not in anger but in clarity. And the men felt it too, because clarity can be uncomfortable when you hoped for chaos. And one of them asked how she knew so much, and Angela answered simply that she paid attention, because paying attention keeps you alive. And the leader tried once more to regain control, telling her that stories did not change facts, that she was still alone and still outnumbered. And Angela nodded, agreeing again, because agreement disarms more than argument. And she said numbers mattered only when everyone believed in the same outcome, and she gestured lightly around them, not pointing and not accusing, just showing the space. And she said she did not think they all believed in this anymore. And that was when one of the men looked away. Another shifted his feet, and the leader felt it, the fracture inside his group. And anger flashed in his eyes, not at Angela but at the situation slipping away from him. And Angela saw that anger and stayed calm, because anger makes people reckless, and she wanted them cautious. And she reminded them quietly that walking away now would cost them nothing, but pushing forward would cost them everything. And the men stood there, caught between pride and fear, and Angela waited again, because waiting gives truth room to work. And in that waiting, she felt the weight of her past settle behind her like a solid wall. Not something chasing her, but something supporting her. And she realized that this moment was not just about survival. It was about reclaiming the story others wrote for her. And the leader finally spoke, his voice lower now, asking why she was telling them all this. And Angela answered without hesitation that she wanted them to understand they had made a mistake. Not a small one, but a dangerous one. And that mistakes like that often ended badly. And she did not say badly for who, because they already knew, and the men exchanged looks. Silent communication passing between them. And Angela could see decision forming, slow and reluctant. And one of them sighed and said they should go, that it was not worth it. And this time, the leader did not snap back right away. And that pause was everything, because it showed he was no longer sure. And Angela stood quietly, letting that doubt grow, letting it do the work she did not need to do herself. And the street felt less tight now, the air easier to breathe. And the men were no longer predators in their own minds. They were people who had misjudged the situation and were trying to find a way out without losing face. And Angela understood that need, because she had felt it before. And she gave them that exit by stepping slightly to the side, opening space instead of blocking it. And she said softly that everyone could walk away right now. And the leader looked at her for a long moment, searching for fear and finding none. And finally he nodded, not in defeat but in acceptance. And he told the others to move. And the men began to back away, slow at first and then faster. Their confidence gone, replaced by relief. And as they disappeared into the darkness, Angela felt a release she did not celebrate but acknowledged. Because survival does not always need victory. Sometimes it only needs understanding. And she stood there for a moment longer, holding her son close, letting the quiet return. And she knew then that the truth she had revealed was enough, because it shattered the image they had created of her. And once that image broke, they had nothing left to stand on. And the audience could feel it too, the deep shift from danger to control, knowing that this was the moment where the tables truly turned, not through force, but through clarity, patience, and the strength that comes from knowing exactly who you are when others do not. The men did not turn and run right away, because fear often moves slowly at first, like it needs permission. And Angela watched them back away step by step, their eyes still on her, still unsure if the moment was truly over. And the street stayed quiet, except for the sound of their shoes scraping the ground, and Angela kept her posture relaxed, not following them and not chasing them away, because chasing invites return. And she wanted distance, clean and final. And she felt her son's hand tighten again as one of the men stumbled slightly and caught himself. And she whispered to her son that everything was okay now. A voice soft and steady, the same voice she used at home when storms passed outside. And the men reached the edge of the light where the street lamp faded. And one of them looked back one last time, his face pale and uncertain. And Angela met his eyes without anger, without threat, just calm. And that calm followed them as they disappeared into the darkness. Because calm is unsettling when people expect fear. And for a moment Angela stood still, listening, counting breaths, making sure the street was truly empty, making sure the danger had moved on and was not circling back. And then a distant sound cut through the quiet. Faint at first, but growing clearer, the sound of sirens far away. Not close enough to panic, but close enough to change the night. And Angela did not know if the sirens were connected to her call or not, and it did not matter, because the sound alone was enough to confirm what the men already feared, that this moment was no longer safe for them. And the sirens echoed between buildings, bouncing off walls and windows. And her son looked up at her with wide eyes and asked what the sound was. And she told him it was just the city breathing, just people doing their jobs. And she smiled gently so he would not carry fear home with him, and she waited a few more seconds, letting the sound move farther away, letting her heart slow down, because after danger passes, the body still remembers it. And she placed a hand on her chest and felt the steady beat, strong and present, and she realized then how close everything had come, how thin the line was between a normal walk home and something much worse. And she felt a quiet gratitude settle over her, not loud and not dramatic, just real. And she looked around the street again, noticing details that had faded during the tension. The small tree near the corner, the light in an apartment window, the smell of food from somewhere nearby, signs of life continuing as if nothing had happened. And she took a deep breath and began to walk again, her steps slower now, careful but no longer heavy. And her son matched her pace, still quiet but relaxed. And after a few steps he asked her why the men left, his voice curious rather than afraid, and Angela thought about how to answer. Because children hear truth differently, and she told him simply that sometimes people make wrong choices when they think they understand someone. And when they realize they do not, they walk away. And her son nodded like that made sense, because to him it did. And they walked together under the streetlights, passing the spot where everything had stopped. And Angela felt the tension leave her shoulders little by little, like weight being set down, and she did not feel proud, and she did not feel shaken. She felt clear, like a problem solved without shouting. And she thought about the men as they moved farther away. How they would talk about this later, how the story would change in their mouths. How they might say the woman was strange or lucky or protected. Anything but strong, and she accepted that. Because strength does not need witnesses. And as they turned the corner toward their building, the sirens faded completely, swallowed by distance, and the night returned to its quiet rhythm. And Angela unlocked the door and stepped inside with her son, closing it gently behind them, and the familiar space wrapped around her. Warm and safe, and she finally let herself sit down, resting against the wall for a moment, letting the last of the tension drain away. And her son sat beside her and leaned his head against her arm. And she held him close, feeling the simple truth of being home. And she realized that what happened outside had already begun to shape something inside him. Not fear, but understanding, and she wanted to guide that understanding carefully. And she told him that being strong did not always mean being loud. Sometimes it meant staying calm when others were not. And he listened quietly, absorbing her words the way children do, without judgment. And later that night when he was asleep, Angela stood by the window for a moment and looked out at the street below. The same street that had felt so dangerous not long ago and now looked ordinary again. And she thought about how easily people mistake silence for weakness. How easily they write stories about others without knowing the truth, and she felt no anger about it anymore. Just awareness, because awareness keeps you ready. And she turned off the light and went to bed, knowing that tomorrow would bring work and routine and tired mornings. And life would go on as usual, but something had changed all the same. Because she had faced a moment where the past and the present met. And she had stood firm, and outside somewhere in the city, the men were still moving. Still thinking, still replaying the moment in their heads. Still unsettled by the calm woman who did not fit their plan. And that unsettled feeling would stay with them longer than fear ever could. And Angela slept with a steady heart, knowing she had protected what mattered most without losing herself. And the audience could feel it too, that quiet resolution. That sense of danger passed not through force, but through understanding and control. And they knew that the final lesson was close. Because moments like this do not end with noise. They end with reflection, and reflection is where real change begins. Morning came slowly, the kind of morning that feels soft and careful. As if the world itself knew the night before had been heavy, and Angela woke before her alarm, lying still for a moment as light slipped through the thin space between the curtains. And she listened to the quiet of the apartment, the gentle sounds of a normal day beginning somewhere outside. And she felt her body remember the night again, not with fear, but with awareness. And she took a deep breath and let it out slowly, reminding herself that they were safe, that the danger had passed, and that today was another chance to move forward. And she got up quietly and checked on her son, watching him sleep peacefully, his face relaxed and untroubled. And that sight filled her with a deep calm, because it meant she had done what mattered most. And she went to the kitchen and made breakfast, moving through familiar motions, pouring cereal, warming bread, letting routine settle her thoughts. And when her son woke and joined her, he smiled like nothing unusual had happened. And Angela smiled back, grateful for that simple moment. And as they ate, he asked her again about the night, not with fear but curiosity. And she knew this was where the real lesson lived. Not on the street, but here, in how she explained the world to him. And she told him that some people look at others and decide who they are without knowing their story. And those decisions can lead to bad choices. And she said it was important to never judge someone too quickly and never let others decide your worth. And her son listened quietly, nodding in his own way. And after breakfast, they left the apartment together, stepping into the daylight where the street looked ordinary and harmless, almost peaceful, and Angela noticed how different everything felt in the sun. How the same buildings and sidewalks that held danger at night now held nothing but passing people and moving cars. And they walked to school together, and as they parted ways, her son hugged her tightly, holding on a little longer than usual, and she hugged him back, steady and warm, and watched him walk away before turning toward her own day. And as she walked, she thought about how close everything had come, and how easily life can change in quiet moments. And she realized that strength is not something you turn on when danger arrives. It is something you build every day without realizing it. Through patience, through awareness, through choosing calm again and again. And at work, she went through her tasks like always, speaking politely, keeping her head down. And no one there would guess what she had faced the night before. And she did not need them to know, because strength does not need approval. And as the day passed, she felt something steady inside her. A quiet confidence that was not new, but newly clear. And when evening came, she walked home again, this time with the street bright and busy. And she noticed how her steps felt lighter, not because she believed danger would never return, but because she trusted herself to face it if it did. And she thought about the men from the night before, wondering what story they told themselves now, whether they would think twice next time they judged someone as an easy target. And she hoped they would, not out of fear, but understanding, because understanding changes people longer than fear ever does. And when she reached home and her son ran to her with excitement about his day, Angela listened with full attention, smiling and laughing. And she felt grateful for the ordinary moments that often go unnoticed, because those moments are what danger tries to steal. And later that night, as she tucked her son into bed, he asked her a simple question, asking if she was brave. And Angela paused, thinking carefully, because bravery can be misunderstood too. And she told him that bravery does not mean never being afraid. It means doing what is right, even when fear is there. And she told him that being calm and thinking clearly can be stronger than shouting or fighting. And he seemed satisfied with that answer, turning onto his side and closing his eyes. And Angela watched him for a moment before turning off the light. And she stood by the window again, like she had the night before. But this time, the street felt familiar rather than threatening. And she reflected on how easily people mistake quiet for weakness, how the world often rewards loud confidence and ignores steady strength. And she knew that would not change quickly, but she also knew she did not need it to, because she understood herself now more clearly than ever. And she carried that understanding like armor, light but strong. And she thought about the lesson of the night, how assumptions can blind people, how underestimating someone can be the most dangerous mistake of all. And she hoped her son would grow up knowing his value without needing to prove it to anyone. And days turned into weeks, and life returned fully to routine. But the story of that night stayed with Angela quietly, shaping the way she walked, the way she observed, the way she trusted her instincts. And she noticed that she stood a little taller now, spoke a little clearer, not because she needed to show strength, but because she no longer felt the need to hide it. And somewhere in the city, the men moved on with their lives too. But the memory of that calm woman on a dark street stayed with them, a reminder that the world is not always what it seems, and that the people you judge too quickly may carry depths you never see. And the audience is left with a clear message as the story ends, not spoken loudly but felt deeply, that real power often lives in silence, that true strength does not always look strong, and that the greatest mistake anyone can make is assuming they know someone's limits without knowing their story. And Angela's story ends not with applause or praise, but with peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing who you are, protecting what matters, and walking forward without fear of being underestimated again.